Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
If you're a rural Alaskan resident, consider applying for a seat on one of the Federal Subsistence Regional Advisory Councils by Friday, January 29, 2016. Applicants who have knowledge of the regional subsistence uses, customs, and traditions are needed. Council meetings serve as a forum for regional public involvement in subsistence management. Information at 1-800-478-1456 or email subsistence@fws.gov.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening and welcome to Alaska Weather. I'm Sam Albanese from the National Weather Service. And we'll get started by taking a look at our warnings around the state and advisories this evening. And to start with, we do have some coastal flood advisories for basically for Cape Newinham up to Jack Smith Bay and then along the coast of the Kuskokwim Delta through 8 p.m. tonight, or actually Tuesday, excuse me. No, that is tonight, excuse me. And that's because of the strong winds and the fetch that's been pushing up the seas along the coast there. We also have some blizzard warnings that were in effect basically along the Yukon Delta region and St. Lawrence Island. They're going to be expiring this evening, but then we're also going to see continuation of high surf advisories for these areas as well. Blizzard warning, well, not a blizzard warning, a winter storm warning for about 8 inches of snow through 6 a.m. tomorrow morning for the lower Yukon Valley, River Valley, and then also in the interior portions of the Seward Peninsula and up into the Kotzebue area, expect blowing snow advisories until tomorrow morning around 6 a.m. So what's driving all this? Well, we have that big storm system that affected the Aleutian Islands and the Bering Sea, and it's continuing its trek up towards the Bering Strait. And as we put the loop in motion, you can see how this is continuing to funnel moisture in along the coast of the state, the Bering Sea coast, and up into the Norton Sound area. And this fetch right here is what's driving those seas. There's some pretty good winds in that. Those are pushing up along the Bering Sea coast. Taking a look at the south central region of the state, weak low pressure in that Prince William Sound area. We had the remnants of the front coming down through the south central region as well. That was fueling basically showery type activity across the south central region. And you can see this system, as large as it was, pushed clouds and warmer air across much of the interior of the state right on up to the Arctic coast. Taking a look now at the surface map today, here's that occluded front that's basically dying low in Prince William Sound, the occluded front and the Triple Point Center down towards southeast Alaska. In the Panhandle, rainy conditions in the southern Panhandle, a mixture of rain and snow further to the north with snow up along that north Gulf Coast, and then snow into the Prince William Sound area, a mixture of rain and snow in the southern part of the Sound and southern Cook Inlet region. Snow scattered throughout the south central region, particularly in the form of showers. Even did see some freezing drizzle earlier in the day today. Snow showers wrapping around behind this front and that southwesterly flow into the southwest portion of the state. Areas of blowing snow creating creating blizzard conditions up over the Yukon Delta as well as the St. Lawrence Island area. Snow was spread throughout the northwest portions of the state up into the interior regions with some snow showers as you move on out across the state and even along the Brooks Range. Some light snow with blowing snow over the western Arctic coastal region. Taking a look at the forecast for tonight, the low pressure system continues its northward trek. It will be weakening. Low pressure is going to be scooting on along the south side of the main low pressure center into that Bristol Bay area. That's going to bring a mixture of rain and snow showers across the Alaska Peninsula into the Kodiak Island area. Expect some frequent snow showers or areas of snow over the south central region, snow in the Prince William Sound area, snow over southwestern Alaska, blowing snow up into the Yukon Delta and the St. Lawrence Island area near blizzard conditions. Those will be tapering off. Expect a continuation of the strong west and southwest winds, keeping rough surf and high surf along the Bering Sea coast. Snow and blowing snow up along the Kotzebue Sound area, areas of blowing snow along the Arctic coast. Interior Alaska, at least the eastern interior, generally cloudy. You may see an isolated snow shower or two. Southeast Alaska, rain showers in the southern panhandle, a mixture of rain and snow showers in the central panhandle with snow showers to the north. By Tuesday, expect the low pressure system to be north of St. Lawrence Island. Weak low pressure into the interior with a front down through the south central region, and basically weak onshore flow into southeast Alaska. In southeast Alaska, expect some rain showers scattered throughout the southern panhandle, mixed rain and snow showers scattered throughout the northern panhandle and the North Gulf Coast near Yakutat. Snow in the Prince William Sound area. Expect some snow over the south central region, Cook Inlet. Snow in the Bristol Bay region. Mixture of rain and snow over Kodiak Island. Snow showers over western Alaska and the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. Snow into the western interior as well as up into across the Seward Peninsula and the Kotzebue Sound area. This trough of low pressure extending along the Arctic coastal regions. You may see an isolated snow shower or two along that, but basically it's just going to keep the winds blowing along the Arctic coast itself. Out along the Aleutian Islands, in the westerly flow across the Aleutian Islands, expect snow showers scattered throughout the length of the Aleutian Island chain. Taking a look now at the forecast for Wednesday, we have this next system that's going to be coming on up into the Gulf of Alaska near Kodiak Island by Wednesday, 965 millibar low. It should be packing a pretty good punch as far as winds go. Warmer air is going to result in rain across Kodiak Island, mixture of rain and snow over the southern Cook Inlet region and along the Aleutian Mountains. Snow around the backside of this system in the colder air across that Bristol Bay region with some snow showers a little bit further north to the Kuskokwim Delta. Further north of that, north of the Alaska Range, generally cloudy conditions. The winds are going to stay south of the range, but expect cloudy conditions with this ridging up into the along the south slopes of the Brooks Range. You may see some breaks in the clouds there. Trough persists along the Arctic coast itself, going to keep the winds blowing out of the east in that region. Weak low pressure just outside of Kotzebue Sound. It's going to result in the potential for some snow shower type activity over northwestern Alaska. Out over the Aleutian Islands and Bering Sea, a ridge of high pressure in behind this low pressure system will result in generally keeping the winds going on the backside of the low, but more calm conditions as you get out into the extreme western Aleutian Islands. Temperatures around the state today: in southeast Alaska, 30s to mid 40s. South central Alaska generally in the 20s, 30s in Prince William Sound. Much cooler in the Copper River Basin in the single digits. Cooler in the Tanana Valley, although the lee side of the Alaska Range, it was kind of like a Chinook there, 25 degrees. Up into the upper Yukon Valley there in the minus teens. To the Arctic coast, you can see temperatures generally in the below zero, between 0 and 10 below Barrow West, with slightly above zero to the east. Over the Seward Peninsula region, Kotzebue Sound, teens and 20s were prevalent there. Southwestern Alaska saw temperatures generally in the 30s over the Yukon and Kuskokwim Delta, right on down into the Bristol Bay region, across the Alaska Peninsula in the 30s as well. 30s in the Pribilof Islands, eastern Aleutian Islands, as well as the central Aleutian Islands, with temperatures a bit cooler out in the extreme western Aleutian Islands in the mid-20s there. Low temperatures tonight. I know this kind of looks funny because our low temperatures are actually warmer than what we were reporting at 3 p.m. Temperatures will be rising through the night in that eastern interior up into the single digits above and below zero. South central Alaska in the teens and 20s, 30s along the coast, 30s in southeast Alaska, 20s across much of southwestern Alaska to the 30s over the Alaska Peninsula, 20s and 30s across the Aleutian Islands and the Pribilof Islands, northwestern Alaska up towards the Seward Peninsula, teens and 20s there. Taking a look at, taking a look at our forecast for high temperatures tomorrow. Southeast Alaska, temperatures generally in the mid 30s to low 40s, 20s and 30s along the North Gulf Coast. Copper River Basin is going to see a mix of temperatures, some single digits, just depends on where you're at and how much of a Chinook kind of comes in. Northern part of the basin, single digits, going to be warmer as you get closer to the Chugach Mountains and over towards Chickaloon Pass there. In the eastern interior, expect your high temperatures tomorrow to be in the single digits, above and below zero. Arctic coast, single digits, above and below zero. Northwest Alaska in the 20s. The Bering Sea coastal areas in the 20s, down to Bristol Bay in the 30s. 30s along the Alaska Peninsula to near 40. Low 30s in the Pribilof Islands, mid 30s across the Aleutian Islands. And taking a look now at our flying weather for tomorrow, expect generally VFR conditions throughout southeast Alaska, some isolated pockets of marginal VFR conditions. IFR conditions in Prince William Sound, VFR to marginal VFR over the south central region. IFR conditions into the Susitna Valley, western interior, right on up into the northwest portions of the state. Some marginal conditions up into the upper Yukon Valley there and the eastern portions of the Brooks Range. IFR conditions basically through the Bering Strait over the Seward Peninsula with some marginal conditions mixed in there. Marginal conditions down into the Bristol Bay area, south side of the Alaska Peninsula, some marginal conditions into the central Bering Sea, and also some marginal conditions can be expected out into the extreme western Aleutian Islands. For our passes tomorrow, for AKwx Path, marginal conditions on the south end of the path, VFR to the north. Same thing for Adigan Path, marginal conditions on the south side of the path, VFR to the north. Along the Alaska Range, Lake Clark and Merrill Path, expect IFR conditions tomorrow. Same thing for Rainy Path, IFR conditions there. Windy Path, marginal to IFR conditions are what you can expect throughout the day. For Isabel Path, marginal conditions, and then over towards Mentasta Path, marginal, sometimes VFR conditions there. Tahneta Path, expect marginal conditions throughout the day tomorrow. And then Portage Path, IFR conditions due to the snow. Southeast Alaska, marginal conditions can be expected in Chilkoot and White Path, occasionally VFR. Taking a look now at our freezing levels. Freezing levels basically at the surface throughout the majority of the state to about 2,000 feet right along the coast and southeast Alaska. Surface to near 1,000 feet out across the eastern to central Aleutian Islands and eastern Bering Sea. Icing for tomorrow. Occasional moderate mixed icing from your freezing level to 11,000 feet over the Prince William Sound area and the Cook Inlet region, or at least the east side of Cook Inlet. Isolated moderate rime icing over northwest Alaska, freezing level to 7,000 feet. Isolated moderate rime icing from your freezing level to 9,000 feet over southwestern Alaska and the Alaska Peninsula. Your jet stream for tomorrow starts off at about 140 knots coming off of northern Japan, tapering off to 85 knots as we get south of the western Aleutian Islands, 80 knots south of the central Aleutian Islands, and as it comes on into the Gulf of Alaska, south of Kodiak Island, 85 knot jet is what you can expect there. 85 to 80 knot jet coming across the southern portions of the Gulf of Alaska to 80 knots as it makes landfall just north of Vancouver Island. Taking a look now down to the 9,000 foot level. About 30 knot winds along the North Gulf Coast to the northern Panhandle, 20 knot winds offshore to 35 knots over the southern portions of southeast Alaska. About 20 to 30 knot winds coming into southwestern Alaska, 40 knot winds at this 9,000 foot level over the Yukon Delta as well as the Seward Peninsula. Up along the Brooks Range, 20 knot winds there, 15 to 20 knot winds along the Arctic coast, and out across the Bering Sea around the south periphery of that main low pressure area. Well, with the low pressure system that's spinning around it, 25 knot winds right around that. Further to the south, 45 knot and west, 45 knot winds, 30 to 40 knot winds along the Aleutian Islands to 20 knots over the eastern Aleutian Islands and the Alaska Peninsula. Down to the 3,000 foot level, 15 to 20 knot winds throughout southeast Alaska, a little bit stronger just offshore. 20 to 25 knot winds over the south central region into Prince William Sound, tapering off to about 15 knots to 10 knots over the eastern interior right on up to the eastern Arctic coast. 20 to 25 knot winds along the Bering Sea coastal areas, accelerating to 30 knots in the western interior. About 35 knot winds right around that main low pressure center near the St. Lawrence Island region. Across the Seward Peninsula, 35 knot winds as well up towards the Kotzebue Sound area and Cape Lisburne. 15 to 20 knot winds just around the south side of that low in the eastern Bering Sea. Lighter winds across the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern Aleutian Islands, and out along the Aleutian Islands themselves in the western Bering Sea. About 30 knot winds in the western Bering Sea, 30 knot winds over the western Aleutian Islands to the central Aleutian Islands, with about 30 to 35 knot winds south of the Aleutian Islands themselves. Taking a look at our Turbulence for tomorrow, not much turbulence expected in southeast Alaska, but over the south central region, light to isolated moderate turbulence over Kodiak Island to the Kenai Peninsula, across the Alaska Range, along the Auckland and Killbuck Mountains in that Bristol Bay area, basically the mechanical turbulence from cross barrier flow across the mountains themselves. Further to the north, where we have stronger winds in the lower levels and the conditions right around that stronger low pressure system, occasional moderate turbulence below about 3,000 feet in that Norton Sound area, basically along the coastal mountains there, across the Seward Peninsula, as well as up into the Kotzebue Sound, and some isolated turbulence below 3,000 feet out over the western Aleutian Islands. That wraps up this portion of the show. Enjoy the segment and come back for the marine forecast.
Good evening, I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and Alaska Public Media, welcome to Hangar Flying. If you tuned in last time, we had John White on. John is an aviation professor at UAA, but he's also an incredibly experienced pilot. I have seen a lot of resumes and talked to a lot of people. Few could match John's experience internationally and nationally and here in Alaska. And one story they can't match for sure is a bewildering story of incarceration and suffering and courage. And I want John to tell you, our viewers, a story. John, would you start out and tell the story, please?
Absolutely, Harry. Okay, so it started off in South Africa, and it was a charter flight from Johannesburg, South Africa to Mauritius, the island of Mauritius. And it was with two diamond dealers who were going over to do business, and we set off. When we crossed over Madagascar, which is the island, and then we ran into some bad weather and diverted back and landed in Madagascar, where in fact we had permission to land, but when we landed, that permission was over a few days revoked. What had transpired behind the scenes was that the President Ratsiraka of Madagascar was good friends with Colonel Gaddafi of Libya, and Gaddafi called him up and said, hey, you know, don't let those guys go, we can use those guys. And so they tried. We were used for 7 years to try and negotiate Nelson Mandela, and there were 13 other political prisoners in South Africa. They wanted to get their release, or our release, in exchange for releasing them. And it never happened.
So you were in prison for 7 years for a crime you never committed?
Correct. For, when we went to court, it was quite interesting. You sit there in court innocent, and then the prosecutor stands up and says he wants the death penalty. You know, and this is kind of a bit of a shock when you're sitting there sort of kind of, who are we talking about here? Anyway, the trial went on, and at the end of the trial, we were sentenced to 5 years. We subsequently escaped from prison, two of the three of us. We were recaptured and got another 2-year sentence for the escape plus a fine. During the escape, the escape was planned for my dad. My father's a pilot as well. He was coming over to fetch us, and they got a Baron, a Beechcraft Baron, and fitted it with fuel tanks to fly over, so they could fly from Johannesburg to Tananarive in Madagascar and back again, which would have been about a 8-9 hour flight. So they needed extra fuel tanks. And he tried that 3 times and wasn't successful. It was just never coordinated well.
Did he actually get to Madagascar?
Yeah, he did.
Wow.
He did.
So there's so many questions. Talk about what was it like in the prison?
Prison, you know, it's in Africa, and Africa generally is not a wealthy continent, so conditions were pretty bad. Conditions are pretty bad in a lot of African villages, and so if you talk about the prisons, it's even worse. So food was rice. We got kind of half a tin of rice a day, and we weren't treated particularly badly, except after the escape. After the escape, we were chained to the ground for, it was a couple of months. And we were fed when they felt like feeding us. And I was fortunate enough to get sick. I got hepatitis and went to hospital for a while, and then the food was better, but for the time chained to the ground wasn't very good conditions.
So I think you had mentioned to me when you were talking about this before that the reason the treatment changed was because they figured you must have had somebody on the outside with helping you escape, and they wanted their names. Is that right?
In fact, that's where with the escape, we got a route which was more coincident than anything else. We went out of the prison and we went in a straight line to a road to their highway, which isn't really much of a highway. And the plan was my dad would land on the road and he'd pick us up there. And so the authorities' deal was you could not have done that without assistance. So somebody helped you. So give us your accomplice and things will go better for you. Of course, there was no accomplice. We got out of prison and I just headed in the direction I thought the road was, and it happened to be a straight line. So,
were you able to communicate with your dad or with your family?
Beforehand and afterwards through mail, kind of bribery. The whole prison system works on bribery. So we managed to bribe a guard to get money into the prison, and then we used that money to get letters out. So yes, we did the communication wasn't easy, but we managed to get letters out every now and then.
John, what an incredible story. I'd like to get you back on at least one more time to maybe finish the story, talk about some of the questions that are probably on people's minds. So,
certainly.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think you would have found, I think you probably found tonight's episode fascinating. Please tune in next time, and John will be back on and talk about his imprisonment and what happened when he finally got out of prison. So until then, fly safe.
Welcome back, and now we'll get started with our sea ice edge for today. And basically, the sea ice edge continues to expand to the south and along the Bering Sea coast and even portions of the Bristol Bay coast. It is through the Bering Strait to the north side of St. Lawrence Island. Taking a look at our marine forecast for southeast Alaska for Tuesday. Expect winds out of the west 20 knots in the southern inside waters and the middle inside waters, with north winds about 25 knots up through Lynn Canal and Glacier Bay. The outer coastal waters for the entire outer coastal region, expected winds out of the west at 30 knots along the entire length of the outer coastal area. On Wednesday, expected winds to increase to about 30 knots out of Lynn Canal and Glacier Bay. Southeasterly winds, and these winds are going to pick up late in the day tomorrow and tomorrow night. 35 knots gale force winds in the southern and central inside waters. Southeast winds 35 to 40 knots in the southern outside coastal waters, and east winds 40 knots as we move on up along the northern portions of the outside waters to the east Gulf Coast outside of Yakutat Bay. For the south central region, expect winds out of the southwest about 35 to 40 knots across Kodiak Island to south of the Kenai Peninsula and south of Prince William Sound. In the sound itself, much lighter winds, about 15 knots out of the south. South winds 20 to 30 knots in Cook Inlet, and southwest winds 25 knots in the Augustine area. Taking a look at the forecast for Wednesday, expect the winds to be turning around in the east and northeast, 45 knots in response to that next system that's coming up. These winds will be increasing late in the day Wednesday night. Northeast winds across Kodiak Island 40 to 45 knots, northeast winds 40 knots south of Calgon Island to the Augustine area, with north winds 30 knots in the northern Cook Inlet region, and east winds 30 knots moving into Prince William Sound late in the day Wednesday. For the Alaska Peninsula on Tuesday, expected winds to be out of the southwest about 25 to 30 knots on the north and south side of the peninsula, 35 knots south of the eastern Alaska Peninsula, and southwest winds 35 knots in that Bristol Bay area. For Wednesday, expected winds to be out of the northwest from Bristol Bay at 30 knots across the eastern Alaska Peninsula to 40 knots on the south side there. North winds about 35 to 45 knots over the western Alaska Peninsula region. Taking a look at the Aleutian Islands for Tuesday. West winds 25 knots over the eastern Aleutian Islands, 25 to 30 knots as we get out more to the central Aleutian Islands, 30 knots over the Amchitka area with 30 knot westerly winds out over the extreme western Aleutian Islands. By Wednesday, expected winds to be out of the south over the extreme western Aleutian Islands as well as the Amchitka area, 40 knots there. West winds 35 knots over the Adak to Atka area, and that'll be dropping off through the day Wednesday. Northwesterly winds 35 to 40 knots as we get over the eastern Aleutian Islands. Taking a look at our Bering Sea coastal region for Tuesday, expect southwest winds across the Pribilof Islands at 25 knots to the Kuskokwim Bay region at 25 knots. West winds 30 knots over St. Matthew Island to the north side of Nunivak Island, southwest 30 there, and southwest winds 40 knots over the St. Lawrence Island waters. By Wednesday, west winds 30 knots over the St. Lawrence Island waters, northwest to north winds 20 to 25 knots from St. Matthew Island to the north side of Nunivak Island, northwest winds 25 knots across the Pribilof Islands, and north winds 30 knots outside of Kuskokwim Bay. For the Arctic coastal waters for Tuesday, expect east winds 25 knots over the eastern Arctic coast to the Barrow region, east winds 30 knots over the western Arctic coast to northeast winds 25 knots towards Cape Lisburne, and 35 knot easterly winds outside of Kotzebue Sound. By Wednesday, east winds are going to persist over the eastern Arctic coastal waters to the Barrow area, southeast winds 20 knots over the northwest Arctic coast, southeast winds 25 knots over the Cape Lisburne region with southwest winds 30 knots outside of Kotzebue Sound. For a quick recap, remember for tonight we do have coastal flood advisories along the basically from Cape Newinham north to Jack Smith Bay and along the Kuskokwim Delta. Blizzard warnings should be expiring over the Yukon Delta as well as St. Lawrence Island, but you're going to continue to see high surf conditions there. Heavy snow can be expected in the lower Yukon River Valley, about 8 inches overnight by tomorrow morning. Blowing snow advisories over the Seward Peninsula, Kotzebue Sound area. Snow and snow showers over southwestern Alaska down towards Bristol Bay with a mixture of rain and snow over the Alaska Peninsula to Kodiak Island. Snow in the Prince William Sound area as well as the south central region or frequent snow showers. Rain and snow over the central Panhandle with some rain showers in the southern Panhandle region. We're out of time for the show this evening. Thank you for watching and have a good evening.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Find a living in fisheries. The UAS Fisheries Technology Program offers online study from anywhere in Alaska, plus labs and workshops in many Alaska towns.
Is most likely a chum.
Find your living without leaving where you are. Fisheries Technology from UAS.
If you are a rural Alaskan resident with an interest in preserving subsistence hunting, trapping, and fishing for future generations, and maintaining an open forum for public expressions, opinions, and concerns regarding subsistence, consider applying for one of the Federal Subsistence Regional Advisory Councils by Friday, January 29, 2016. More info at 1-800-478-1456 or email subsistence@fws.gov.